Mhm. Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning today's 3 Prakim Rambam, which will be Hilchai Shchenim, Prakim Aleph, Beis, and Gimel. And let us begin with the header that Rambam begins, Hilchai Shchenim, which are the laws of neighbors. Interestingly, there isn't any specific mitzvah, not positive nor negative, connected to it. However, the Rambam writes that Inyan Elo Halachos is Leida Din Chiluk HaKarkois Ben HaShutfim. We're gonna learn the proper way to divide land among shutfim, amongst partners, and v'harchakas niskei kol echad mehem mishcheino, how one should remove factors, right, that can damage one's neighbor or that can be a danger to one's neighbor, and also umibal hametzer shaloi, the laws concerning the privileges that are granted to a person upon whom's one property's borders. I'm sorry, but ubal din hametzar ubir kol hadinam ha'elu will be Prakim Elu, beginning with the first chapter. The first chapter is all about the correct way of dividing a partnership. Perek Rishon has 5 halachas. Let's begin, Chavre, with halacha Aleph. Says the Rambam, whether one from the outset purchases half of someone else's field, or shnayim shekonu me'echad sada, 2 people by one field for both of them, from a third party, from the original owner, or 2 people or more. Sheyarshu, they inherit a field. It used to belong to one, now it belongs to more. Oy shenitna lahem b'matana, 2 people received a field as a gift. Oy shechziku b'am hefker, or they jointly took possession of, they made a kinyan together, either something that was the regular hefker ownerless property, or nichse hager, as we have been learning, that if a ger passes away without having any children after he converted, then his property becomes hefker. Whenever 2 people own jointly land, and one of them wants to make a division. In other words, the premise of all divisions are that we don't say, you want to divide? Then you pay a premium. I'm good with the partnership. You own out. That is something that we reject. Any party that unilaterally wants to divide the partnership, so then here are the rules. Rule number 1, this is important. As we'll be explaining, if the property is large enough to be divided, the Rambam is going to explain later. What does it mean, large enough to be divided? But if it's halachically a dividable property, then even though only one wants out, he halachically has the right to force the other partners to make a division. However, but if this is a property that halachically is not large enough to be divided, also important, you cannot force a division. Now, if you can force a division, it doesn't mean that they're trapped together forever, but we'll get there in a moment. And we're going to have many pratim more about how do we apply it. Now, that what? That if it's a halachic thing that cannot be divided, no one can force a division. That's only when neither of the partners recognize a specific portion, meaning that they have a partnership up until now. Each one of them are using all of the property. So since halachically, or when halachically it does not have a din chalukah, then you can't force the division of the land. We're going to see in a moment, you can always force a division of the partnership. You cannot force a division of the land. I'm just giving you an example, that when 2 people own the property, and just the way between them was, this guy used the part on the right, and that guy used the part on the left. I don't care whether halachically the part on the right was large enough to be called a field, as we'll see later. Was everyone already is habituated into using only a specific part, there we say even more. And again, I want to add this. The key is that even though only one party wants out of the partnership, there's a din of kfiyah. Then you force a division. Now, how do you force a division? I'll tell you very simply. You put a fence up. Let me just spill the beans in one idea. The Rambam is going to write it explicitly later. But let's say if they own together a chutzner, so halachically, land has to be a minimum size for it to be called a courtyard. If you're going to divide this into two, neither of the parts will have that size. So that's called she'ein badin chaluka. But still, if me and you are neighbors and there's a chutzner that we own together, and I always, common sense, I use the part next to my house, you use the part next to your house, if it's a very small parcel of land, then if I decide, forget about partnership, let's divide it, we put a wall up in between and we make a division. Halacha beis. Let's go back to a case where no one had previously used a specific part. They are partners both using all of the chutzner. It's a chutzner that's not large enough where halachically you can divide it in half. As again, we're going to see more details later. Or forget about din chalukah. Sometimes you cannot divide, like a piece of land, theoretically, I can use this corner, you can use that corner. What happens if people own a shivcha together or they own a keli? Right? You can't divide the pot in half, then you have nothing. So then, here is the rule that if the partner that wants out, again, you can never force people to be together, says, you know what, I can't divide it, but he gives out a number. And he says, listen, let's say it's 50-50, but the same thing will be 60-40, 70-30. Let's go to a 50-50. I'm one partner. I'm unilaterally deciding that this keli is worth $100, which means you own 50 and I own 50. I can always tell you, I'm going to give you 50, which is what I think half is worth, and I'm going to buy out your share. Or you give me that same number and you buy out my share. This is what the Gemara calls goida eged. It's a very fair way of making a cheshbon, because who am I to have the right to make such an assessment? I'll tell you who am I. As long as I am willing for you to do to me what I am suggesting for me to do to you, that keeps me in check. That will mean, in other words, if I'm going to really under-evaluate your half, I'll understand that you will then have the right to use my number and buy me out. I don't want to be bought out for a small number. But again, the nakuda will be is that I have seen this many times. One partner says, one second, I'm happy with the partnership. I'm happy with you want out. I know that if both of us would have wanted, each half is worth 50. I know that my half is worth, I don't want out. If you want out, you pay a premium. That is something that's rejected in halacha. We don't say that. People are not forced to be together. I know it's painful for one party to hear, I thought we had a great relationship. We invested all my life in this business. Things were finally making money. What do you mean you're ruining my life? It's very sad. That's life. That's life. It happens all over. People cannot be forced to be where they don't want to be. That again, that's called goy doyega. Goy doyega, the Gemara says means acquire or I will acquire. Now, what happens if the other partner, Hativeh is the other one? The other guy does not want to purchase his chelik. Or I'll tell you better, the other partner cannot afford to do so. I can never force the other one to buy me out, even if I offer him a great deal. One partner has the right, the other partner always has the right to say, don't force me to buy you out. But he can never not sell. You understand that? Goy to eged means you have two options. What happens if, let's say it's me and you, I want out, you don't want out. So I tell you, listen, I think that each half is worth 50. I'm going to give you 50, or you can buy me out for 50. The other guy says, I cannot afford. I cannot afford doesn't mean I cannot force a division. If you cannot afford, I'm going to buy you out. Lafika. Even though we're going to see later that, okay, let's go to the Mecca. There are certain bathhouses that could be divided. But let's go to a bathhouse. There's only one bathroom, one bath mikveh, only one changing room. Can't divide it. Or an olive press. There's only one press. So then it depends like this. If from the outset, that means they got it from their father. If the father used it as a rental income, guys, rental income can always be divided. Money can be divided. That's something that yesh din chalukah. In other words, I cannot buy you out. How can I force you to buy out? You say, no, leave it the way it is. And let's divide the income. As long as they want to be together, as long as they want to be together, so then they divide the income. But if the father used it for himself, one party cannot say, you know what, let's rent it out now. Ella, they must give continuity to the way the father used it, which means one day one brother, one day the other brother. Listen here, you take your olives and you use the Beis Habadim. This day, you get your avadim, which normally was needed to have help in a bathhouse, and come and use the bathhouse on that day. And the ani cannot force one party to buy his chelik. That's whenever it's goydoy egoid. It has to be two-way streets. Why will the ani force? The ani says, listen, if father only used it for himself, which means that we really have to give continuity. I'm poor. I don't need it. I cannot own olives. I don't have avadim. Without avadim, I cannot use the bathhouse. I don't have anyone to heat it up. I don't have anyone to help me. So therefore, you have to buy out my share. No one can ever say that. No one can ever say you have to buy my share. Either there's a din chalukah, or goyd oya goyd. Elam kein oimeloi knei mimeni omacharli.
You can't come in with the buy or sell without being open to the other option.
That's it. That's it. Hareni loiv and I am ani. He has to be ready to borrow money and to buy it. There's another option that Rambam says: if you're an ani, you can sell your share to someone else, and then you can buy it. Take that money and owe him the money. No, it's din chalukah. But I'm already gave an example. If the father used it for himself, then a beis hamerchatz has a din chalukah. Din chalukah means I use it one day, you use it the other day. If you would prefer to have another agreement, you also don't have the right to superimpose it. Another detail about partnerships when they inherit something. Okay, beautiful. Omar kol echad mehem. Each party is saying, "Any koina, I don't want to buy it." No party wants to be the owner. Ella hareni moicher chelki. Well, the guys, if two people want to share their part in a business, find a third party and I'll buy both. And the price will be what the price is. That's life, my friends. You know, there's a market value. There's what you think the value is. There's a real market value. The market value, you have people that take advantage. Of course you do, but that's life. In other words, people take advantage up until a point, unless you allow them to be taken advantage of. So will they have to undersell it a little bit? Probably. What happens if both parties want to be the ones that are buying? Both parties want to buy. Now you got a problem. Selling is easy. Guys, these things happen so often. You know, this is like the foundation of a business dismantlement. If both people are insisting, I don't want to buy, I don't want to sell, I want to remain partners in the baguf. So what do? It's like this. If you live in a place where this item is rentable, even though the father never rented it, but still, when they're having an issue, they don't want to dismantle it. They're insisting. So then rent it out. But if it's not made for rent, then each one will have that property for a certain amount of time. Now, do you go back every single day? Of course not, because if I can only have it for one day, you have it for one day. How can you use a courtyard? By the time I move my stuff in there, I have to move out already. So a chatzar, we say sheikhlim b'shana shana. They alternate, and it has to be a year at a time. To force people to be together is not even possible because of a concept called hezek, which is a lack of privacy, as we're going to learn soon. If there would be a din chalukah, guys, then they would put up a wall in between. But again, we're speaking about a chatzar that's not large enough. So that's the right amount of time of this alternation. If they have a bathhouse, so again, you try to go to agoy. No one wants to buy, no one wants to sell, but they don't want to be partners. So then they say like this: if it's a bathhouse, then nichnasim la shneim tamid b'chol yom. Let them both always have access. You know, in a chutzner, I cannot do certain things if you have access to it. In a bathhouse, everybody share it together. He goes back to a merchotz. Interestingly, a matzah. I don't know how people can share a mattress at the same time, but they can share a mattress at the same time. Or a sefer Torah. No. 1 day for me, 1 day for you. No. Guys, every halacha here is huge. When people get this chapter good, a Rav needs this, because whenever there's a machloikas and people want to take apart a partnership, that Rambam was touching on all of the foundational approaches you have to come to a correct division. Halacha gimel. Someone is renting part of a chotzer or part of a sada that does not have a din chalukah. Now we're going to rent. So they both have it together as renters. The concept of goida egoid will be either I want to sublease it from you, or I will sublease mine to you. And the im yesh by din chalukah chalkin. In other words, the same principle that we use when it comes to division of ownership. If there is a halachic din chalukah, then you force a chalukah. If there's no halachic din chalukah, then goida egoid. Same thing is said by rentals. And now that Rambam is going to, okay, so now we speak about the din chalukah. That's the first thing you want to know. So halacha daled ezehu din chalukah. Kol she'ilu yechalek l'fiyashutfim yagia lapacha shebehem chelik sheshem hakol karu alav. That's the key. No, it's if when you make the division. Now again, if they both own it 50-50, that means each one will get half. I'm speaking about the physical thing that they own together. If it's 90-10, then one guy will only get 10% of the land. You have to look at the smallest portion. We need, for every single part of this divided, let's say, land, to be large enough that the name that was given for the whole piece, for the whole parcel, will still be the same name used for the piece. They owned a chutzner. Guys, if you halachically, if there's a piece of land that's adjacent to your house, but if it doesn't have 4 amas by 4 amas, halachically, it's not called chutzner. It's not called chutzner. So you had a chutzner, divide it, will every part, even the smallest link in the chain, still be called a chutzner? Avalim ein shem hakol nikra al on any of the halakim, even on the smallest chelik, ein ba din chalukah. That's something that you cannot halachically divide itself. Ketzad, for example, kol chutzner she'ein ba arba amas al arba amas, ein a krei chutzner. Chol sada she'ein ba kadei zriyas tisha kabin, any field that is not large enough. Guys, we just had this previously. To plant the quantity of 9 kav is not called a sada. We speak about 9 kav of grain. Any garden, it's a lot more chashuv. You know, it's a much smaller amount is suffice, but you have to have at least a half a kav. It's not called a gina. Of fruits, and therefore lefika. I want to make a parenthesis, and don't worry, God willing, we're going to learn this today. There's another thing just to know practically. You can't say everything together. And that is that when you have houses going into a courtyard, there is a certain amount of the yard that's adjacent to the doorway that becomes halachically part of your doorway. So when the Rambam is speaking about, let's say, if 2 people own a chutzner, you really need to begin with at least 8 by 8 amas to be able to, after you divide it in half, each one to have 4 by 4. That's excluding a certain area near the psachim. We'll get to that later. Similarly, if they're dividing a sada, it has to be done in a way. The Rambam is emphasizing because by default, I'm speaking about a partnership of 50-50, but that's not always the case. Many partnerships, like I said, is 90-10. If it's 90-10, we need to make sure that even the guy that only owns 10, getting 10% of the physical space, the marka will be large enough for this amount. Another layer, another detail. We are allowing for a field of only, imagine, the base Tishas Kabin to be called a field. You know what? The Rambam is going to write, that's not the truth everywhere. That's only true in Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael is very chashuv. And even if you want to apply, nothing is like Eretz Yisrael, but to a certain degree it is. And that is that Eretz Yisrael is considered a place where land is scarce and therefore very valuable. And if you live in a certain area, in a certain country, where land is a lot more affordable, no one will buy a field if it only has that amount. There's a financial aspect. Financial aspect is, I'll give you an example. When you have a field, you have to hire workers to harvest it. When you hire workers, you pay them by day. In other words, if I have a field that there's only enough work for 4 hours, it's very difficult to find labor for 4 hours. You find workers for a day. It's not worth it for you to own something that you don't get your whole full day's worth. And that's going to be taken into account. So land is scarce, land is valuable. This is in addition to the Kedusha. Abel, Bavel, just not only Bavel. Right? Like it depends. Like you can say, Lahavdil, if you live in LA, one din. If you live out there, land is much cheaper. You buy enough land that you need a full day to plow. The lawyer's part is 36 trees. Again, what's the logic behind the 36? It's not about the 36. It's about avodas adam echad b'yom echad. It's all about whenever you have to hire a worker, you're going to get a full day's worth of their work. You're going to pay them for a day regardless. So you want to have for them work for a full day. Or v'sadeh, what type of sadeh that needs to be irrigated with a deli? In other words, the irrigation canal is not enough. You have to do manual label to add water. Same logic. So you have to have people schlepping the bucket and the water. Okay. So in other words, all of this just unpackaged for a moment. The din chalukah, the chelek sheyesh by din chalukah. But now that we gave these, this is enough. But let's come back. The ikad of the Perek is yesh by din chalukah. You divide it itself. Ein by din chalukah, goyd or egoyd. Okay, halacha hey, which is the final halacha of this chapter. Ein cholkin es hateraklin v'lo es hamoiran. Guys, teraklin and moiran are two large buildings, a palace, a building. V'lo es hashoyv. In other words, don't say that since a palace has 88 bedrooms, divided in half. When you divide it in half, it's not a palace anymore. In other words, certain things, even though you can argue that it's functional, even if you would only to use half, no, it doesn't have a shame on each half. Right, a shoivach, a duff coat. Even if it's very large, whatever it is, if you divide it in half, it's going to be called half of. It won't be given the full name. And not a Beis Habad, and not a Merchotz, a Talis. You could divide it if each half will be large enough, meaning, in Merchotz, he gives a good example. Guys, we're speaking about a Beis HaMerchatz. If I understand the Beis HaMerchatz, we're speaking about a large building. If even after you cut the building in half, or you put up walls in half, each half has enough space to have in it all that's needed in a Beis HaMerchatz. Right, the Bais Pnimi and the Bais Hamtzoy and the Bais Chitzoni. If each half will be useful as a dovkot, then you could. Think about it, you have a large talus. Some talesos are so large that even after you cut it in half, each half is considered a talus. Then you could divide it in half. However, so again, that's just applying the same din that we began this chapter on Karka. We're just bringing it down to Metaltalin. Also, Malinoise Bedamin. Malinoise means you have to make an assessment. Bedamin, you have to assess how much it's worth. The Yesh, any partner has the right to tell his friend, again, Goido Egoid Boloshan Chazal, the Rambam says, buy it or sell it. Omar Echad Mehem, Chaloik Zeh, Afapi She'ena Chalokim Shavim. Even though it's, if you were to divide it in half, ani etelas hapachos v'telatas hayose, ein shoymen loy, sharei oimer loy, ein irit shoyni likach matana, elohoyel ve'ein badin chaluka b'shava, harei anu malin oisem b'damin. Givaldik. In other words, it could be to have a partnership that's 50-50, right? And if you were to divide it 50-50, no chelik will be called a talus. But if you were to divide it 70-30, then the chelek of 70 will be called a talus. So one guy is saying, okay, divide it 70-30, you keep the 70, you will have the same name. I want out with the 30. He cannot do that. Either each part has din chaluka or goidoy agoid. Beautiful. Okay, now we're going to learn the second chapter about partners, not when they are dividing, but this is really the opening of Baba Basra. This is what Chazal call hezek v'iyah, and there is a halachic responsibility in certain areas to make sure that each party has privacy. This chapter has 18 halachas, beginning with halach aleph. Chatzrais hakfarim, courtyards and villages. Shekol echad de'echad boino loy bayis. Right, in each chatzar, whoever has it will build a house. And it comes out when you have such a living style. The courtyards will have many homes that jointly own the courtyard. First thing you need to know is that in front of every doorway, now you can have a doorway that's 6 feet wide, you can have a doorway that's 20 feet wide, whatever the width of the doorway is, that's what it is. But then going into the chutzner, going into the lane, you extend 4 amas, and that belongs halachically to that Pesach. And then anything else or everything else that's in addition, here again, in yesh bay arba amas al arba amas the chol shutav v'shutav. That is what we learned in the previous chapter, chol kenoisa. But the imlav, the chutzner can have 8 by 8 amas. The chutzner can have a 12 by 12 amas. But you can still, there will be cases where it does not have a din chalukah. Like we mentioned, Bekitzur in the previous chapter, this is really the topic now opening over here. You have to first gift. You have to designate the daled amas for every Pesach. And if afterwards you don't have 4 by 4 for each chelek, ein chol kenoisa, because shekol chatzar she'ein by arba amas al arba amas ein a koroi chatzar ein by din chaluka. Well, are they forced to be together? No. Goydo yagoy, but you got to do a goydo egod. But another, I just want to remind everyone from the previous chapter, and that will be also in most cases by chatzeros, even when there isn't a din chaluka, I think that when people, I have one house on one side of the chutzner and you have your house on the other side of the chutzner, when we were still partners, in most cases, everyone used their corner, especially the way they used to use chatzeros in the times of Chazal. It wasn't just for the kids to play in the backyard. People, Pasha, the houses were very small. They needed to add, so you had your oven there, you had your stuff, you would put your stuff nearer to your house. Once each party just used that specific location, we learned in the previous chapter, no, it doesn't matter how little each half is, any party can unilaterally decide, we're putting up a wall in the middle just to make it, that's it. You keep yours, I'm keeping mine. Okay, so. It's amazing. No, it's each one has an equal amount of ownership in the chutzner. Happens to be that one guy built 2 homes. One guy built 1 home. The remaining land is equal. So the din is, prior to making a division, when you could, to the chutzner, prior to that, the one who has 2 homes will have more doors. 4 amas into the chutzner. Now, how wide? Not dalid by dalid. It depends on the width of the door. If it's a very narrow doorway, it's going to be very narrow, right? People can comfortably actually fit in an amma. You have 2 amas, right? I don't know that there's certain standards in the building codes here in America or here in California. I mean, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how wide or how narrow. Whatever the width is, that going 4 amas into the chutzner. Afilo haya 10 amas. The zesh usually only one bias only gets 4 amas pischei lefnei pischei. And now v'hanishim ben achotzer in yesh boy shmaya amas kadei sheyeh loza 4 amas loza 4 amas chutz mishnal psachim. Then yesh boy den chalukah. And if either party, anyone wants to divide the partnership, then they have to. It's forced upon them. And if pachos mizeh ein boy din chalukah, and the other solution will be, like we mentioned in the previous chapter, goyda eged. Halacha beis. Now, Let's go even more. Not that one guy has two homes. Each one only has one home. But one guy built a door to every side of his home. These homes are fully encircled within the chutzner. So be it. Yesh loy arba ames l'chol ruach. However, there's a however. If I have many doors, it wasn't that common for people there to have many doors. See, the homes we have now are like bigger than the palaces that kings had. You'll go to excavations in Yerushalayim and HaKodesh where Kohanim were wealthy. You see their homes were like a little bedroom. If people would have many doors, it was common that they would only use one. So if a house de facto has many doors, but in Yiched loy Pesach, they only use one door, then ein loy ella arba amas keneged Pesach. Now we're going to go into other types of living environments. There's something called a achsadra. It's some sort of Greek porch. We're speaking about an environment that has 2 or 3 walls. Some of them were roofed, some of them were not roofed. So now I want to just add something that you have to chap for this. Why did the Chazal, this is a din of the Chachamim, why did they give you 4 amas? They gave you 4 amas because, again, the homes were very small. People would bring their horse up until the door of their home, and you need a space to unload or to load the animals to bring things in the house to take things out of the house. That's important. If you have an environment that you don't use for your bedroom, like these achsadras, there were certain times that we're going to say, you don't get 4 amas outside. Bring your donkey in the achsadra and load and unload in it. You understand? So let's go. If, however, that whatever types of means of transportation, let's speak about people use donkeys. It's such a type of structure where you can bring your donkey inside of it. So then why would you get the 4 amas outside of the doorway where you don't need it? And here the Rambam writes, and if you don't need to do it outside of this environment, guys, if a person has an achsadra type of area, maybe if they actually use it as their bedroom, then no one is going to say to bring the donkey. I don't know, but I'm saying it didn't work that way. Halacha dal. Beishar, if you have a guard's room, or if you have a mirpesas, people live in there. That the doors going into them, yeshva arba amas. However, the Rambam writes like this: if you have a picture, that would be great. In other words, if you have a porch on the 2nd story, but the mirpetzes, you have stairs going down this porch, and it goes into the chutzner. You don't say that since 5 people are going to use that for access, each one gets, it demands 5 times that amount. A great picture. You don't say that. You don't say that. Whoever's coming will unload 4 amas in front of the steps. Ein la'el arba amas. Halacha. Lul shultan goylem, a chicken coop. Ein la'arba amas. Nukud. You don't need that. People don't load and unload there. And if you do it, you're bottled. Halacha. Bayis, what happens if you have a house? Imagine half of it is not roofed, and it doesn't even matter where the unroofed part is. Normally, at least, if the roof part is within the house, which means the unroofed part is closest to the door, then it's easier to understand this halacha. The Rambam writes, even if that it's the roof is by the door. If you to get to the unroofed area, you have to walk through the roofed area. The unroofed is all the way at the end. Now that's a big wow, which means a clear that you don't want to bring a donkey into your home, but you got to. We do say that you have to bring it into your notes. If it's shaykh to lifroik velisa to unload, right? Lifroik masoi inside, then do it inside. Another thing. What happens if you have a bayis sasum? In other words, the entrance is closed off. Then it depends. If you left the door frame was not destroyed. Yesh loy arba amas, because we say that it was only closed temporarily. It's going to be reopened. It doesn't lose its 4 amas. But if if the doorway was completely destroyed, then we say ein loy arba amas. Halacha. Let's get moving. Halacha ches bayish ein boy arba amas al arba amas. If the house itself doesn't have the 4x4, it has to have a halachic definition of a house. Ella, very simple. Im yesh b'chol hachatzer arba amos lezeh, arba amos lezeh, ad pesach habayis then cholk. Another din. Now we're getting a little bit off topic. That Rambam wants you to know that there's a certain manure has value, and hazevel shel chatzer. Interestingly, when they make that division, you don't say, well, if two houses and are part of the chatzar, each one gets half. You also make a cheshbon dani according to the doors. Now, I can ask why? Because zevel is brought out of the house through the psachim. But so what? Just because you have two doors, it doesn't mean you're going to have more zevel. That's the rule. The rule is that we're going to take the amount of doors into account as we do here when it comes to the division of the zevel. But when it comes to achsanya shel melech, when it comes to a tax that the king would impose on all of the people that live in this city, and it goes on people that live on this block, people that live in this chutzner, which depends with how many houses, it has nothing to do with doors, it has to do with people. So doors and no doors, that will not change the burden of tax. It's not even more animals. I don't even know. Not even more animals. It's not. I know. Okay, I don't know. No, I just brought it up. Like what? Even though the house with more doors won't produce more manure. Doesn't say depending how many people. You can argue it depends how many people. We don't do that. That's the din. Just like they own dalad amis, they end up having a certain ownership. Halacha 9. Hashutim shiratzu lachlik davar she'emay den chaluk. So let's go back to what we learned in the first chapter. Many things don't have din chalukah, and either one can step out of the partnership. If both of them choose, we're going to divide it, we're not going to sell it, then chalkin, because it's their money. You're going to say pshita. I know pshita, but the Rambam is saying this as an intro to exceptions. Imagine they have a chamisha chumshei Torah, and 5 people own it, and they say, you know what, everyone will get a chumash. They're not allowed to divide it. That they don't have the right to divide it if it's all now in one scroll, and you dividing the one scroll into 5 different chumashim, you downgrade its kedusha. But if lechatchila it's already with 2 kerichos, then of course it's not lachlik cholkin. Okay, halacha yud. Makam she'em in chalukah, and yet shirotzu hashutim lacholkai, which other than the exceptions and halacha test they could do so. Afapi, that they made a kinyan to express their agreement to make such a division, that kinyan has no halachic effect. Because as we learned before, it's called kinyan devarim, right? Kinyan devarim is something that we learned in Hilchos Mechira, right? Halacha hey, and so they made a agreement to do something verbally. It's garnished. But if they already specified which part, and they made a kinyan regarding that part, then in other words, when you undertake to do something that's not defined, you should do it. You're definitely ethically bound to it, but you're not legally bound to it. Once whatever each one is going to be doing was specifically defined, then a kinyan will be effective. If people already began to use that part, even though they didn't make a kinyan, already because one of them made a chazaka. In other words, when I make a chazaka, even though really without your prior consent, I would not be able to make a chazaka because it doesn't have a name of a chatzar. We agreed, and I made it. You are automatically bound by it, and you cannot retract. So they, the first fight is, let's say there's 3 brothers. Let's take out din b'chayda. Everyone is getting an equal portion, and they agreed what will be consistent. What will consist a chelik? What's a chelik? It's a very difficult thing to do, right? Sometimes it's easy if there are 3 houses and they're exactly the same and they have the same value. Okay, house A, house B, house C. But normally that's not the reality. They already agreed what should be defined as a chelik. And now they have to determine, guys, which one is getting which chelik. So there's an amazing thing. If they make it through a goydol, when one person took out his goydol, So not only did he acquire that chelek, but kanu kulam. Now, hold on. I just want to add a detail. Kanu kulam, like an halacha yud, of course, makes sense, Danny, if there's only two brothers. That I get. Because since my taking of the lot, that's considered it's mine. So if that's mine, what's left is yours. What happens if there are three brothers? So just because one guy got his chelek, it doesn't mean, kanu kulam only means that the other two now jointly own the other two parts. That's what it means. That cannot be retracted. Between that double portion, who's getting what? There's no kinyan yet on that. And how did that happen? Since they agreed to what will be consistent of a chelek. And one guy already, he got the goydel, he removed himself from the other two. So halacha yud. Now, when brothers make a division, the big sugya that we have in Gemara is these are the two ways of looking at a division. One way is called bereda. Bereda means that now that they decided and they agreed upon and they made a goydel or whatever they did, and everyone has a part of the father's estate, we view it as if from the outset this was theirs. It's a retroactive clarification, not that they were ever partners. That's one way of looking at it. The Rambam is paskening with the side, no, that when the father passes away, the tfusas habayis always means that there's, until when they make a division, they are partners. Now, if they are partners, that would then, the next step would be that when they do divide it, it's like a sale. Because if I and you owned everything jointly, and now I'm only going to own half and you're going to only own half solely, how did that work? Because my ownership in what you're keeping, I'm selling to you. And how are you paying it to me? By you, so to say, selling, exchanging, giving to me your part in what now is only mine. It's called a sale, and that's very significant whether you say bereda, whether you say a sale, as the Rambam writes. So the Rambam first paskin so achim shecholku, not bereda, but yes, harayim kelekuchas emizeh. Each one, it's as if each one bought it from the other, and therefore, when the father owned everything, he owned, let's say, 2 fields, and the way to get into field A is by walking through field B. Of course, the father, as the sole owner, walked through field B. If we would say bereda, I just want to make it clear, bereda means that from the outset, the guy in the inner field got the inner field. We would then say, not only did he get the inner field, but he got the rights that the father had using the outer field. He's an extension of the father. Bereda means there was never an extension from the father, then all of the schusim continues to him. Since we don't say bereda, we say you're like a purchaser. A purchaser, what did we learn in Hilchas Mechira? If both of these two people would have bought it from a third party, based on the rule that called it when you sell, ba'ayin yafa, everyone got all of what they got, but nothing of the other chelik. So therefore, they don't have a derech zelzeh. They don't have the right of way. The father used the right of way, so what? He's not an extension of the father. It's a new purchase. Or sulam meizeh alzeh. If the ladder that goes into the part that I got is on your chutzner, I don't own that part of the chutzner at all. And if you who got the bottom chutzner will decide to make a building there, even though it's going to mean that I don't even have where to put my ladder, you have the right to do it.
That changes the property. That changes the property.
Yes, that's the whole. If it would have been bereda, then we wouldn't have been able to say it. Bereda would simply mean that all of the rights that the father had, of course he had the rights everywhere, and the way of use continues. None of that has to continue. Or if there's a certain amount of windows, and we're going to see a lot later, am I allowed to open up a window or to v'chulei and hezekriya? None of the rights that had continue. It happens to be that the water canal goes through your field, which now is your field, into what now is my field. You can say, pay me for the right. I can say, what are you talking about? We both got it from our father. The water canal was always here. So what? They're not an extension of that. They're new buyers here. And therefore, now it's mine, I don't. Why would I want to have your water canal? Now, of course, the guy wants money. For money, money resolves everything. Again, Hezekiah, that will be today's third chapter, something very significant. So the father owned everything. So the second story had windows looking down to the yard. The father didn't care because he lived in the second story. Now that one brother got the higher story and one guy is downstairs, in certain cases, the guy says, that window you got to close. Or like we mentioned, that the only way to get, even if the only way to get to the second story was by using an outside staircase that is on the ground. The guy that got the ground can say, I want to build something here. The guy upstairs says, and how will I get it? He says, that's not my problem. What he really wants is money. I mean, money will resolve these things. Or not.
And laws of privacy, second floor window.
Also, whoever's privacy is being invaded upon, will have the right, we'll get more details in the next chapter, and further to tell him, you have to do something to make sure that you cannot invade the privacy through seeing. And the guy that says, why? I'm leaving it the way our father had it. No, because you're not an extension of your father. If they would have jointly owned it, if they would have continued what we call in the Gemara Tfisa Sabayis or Tfusa Sabayis together, even if one guy de facto would be upstairs and one guy downstairs, no one would have the right to say close the window, because then they're continuing to live the way the father had that window, you have the window. The father had a ladder, we have a ladder. There was a canal, there's a canal. And the truth is, same thing, Stam. There was, forget about Yerusha. Yaakov owns a field. He sells it to Reuven and Shimon, not his kids. And now Reuven and Shimon divide it. Once you buy something from her, and now you make a division, it's like a sale. And therefore, theoretically, or actually, mafsik, now, Aval, however, two people buy a field that did not belong to one person. It lachatchila belonged to two people. Guys, this is a big chap over here. Two people bought a field not even belonging to two brothers. They bought a field that belonged to two separate people. In other words, the original owners already had an agreement. The original owners, two different owners. The original owners had an agreement that the guy that lived in the second story didn't own the chutzner, but he had the right to put his ladder there. And the guy downstairs sold the rights of him removing it. He had the right of use. And they never even specified that in the document. Since it belonged to two people, and now two new people, each one is taking place of the other one, here's where you say all of the rights are grandfathered in. You're not making a new chalukah. Why does
he have to say two people?
It has to be two people. That's the whole word.
Meaning, why can't you just say that the guy upstairs sold his portion, the guy downstairs remained?
That's what he means. That's what he means. That's what it means.
It's a new buyer. You can't say, oh, this you can't.
It's even a bigger chiddush. Even though both people are new, then you can argue and make a new agreement. Because if they're continuing to double, okay, good. Right, halacha Yudah, clear. Chatzar hashutfim sheyesh badin chaluk. Oy, exception is shulchan kol b'retzainam. They put a wall up. Each part only has 3 by 3 amas. They both agree to that. Now, now that we're making a division, and guys, it doesn't go to fields, as we'll see. It goes to chatzeros, because the type of use that people ideally would use in a chatzer is of personal nature, in which that if I feel that you can look at what I'm doing, things that normally people do in a chatzer, they will not be comfortable to do. Halachically, I don't even have a chutzner. If we agree to divide it, we are agreeing for it to be called a chutzner. And why? That's the word shehezik re'iyah heziku. Or hezik re'iyah, the Gemara says shmei hezik. Everything is undoing. But damage that is caused by an invasion of privacy is called damage. The other logic would be, who's stopping you? Go bathe. The guy says, no, I can't. I'm not comfortable. That's on you. No, it's not on you. And furthermore, when you make a division right now, You have to build a wall. That's exactly what we're learning in the beginning. No, it's before we both owned it. Now that we're dividing it, has a kriya. Grandfathered in would only be, right, again, in the exception that we had in Halacha Yud Gimel. If it belonged to one and now we're making it into two, you always are machayev both parties to do what halachically needs to be done to take care of the privacy issue. Now, now that they are both obligated equally in Hezekriya, even if one party was the one that divided the chalukah, even though one party began all that. So no more than that. If they both have to do it, they both have to give the equal amount of land. And how wide, how much of the chutzer's land needs to be designated for a wall that will resolve the Hezekriya? That depends. This is like the beginning of the Sechtas Bava Basra. If you live in a place where it's enough to make a reed or a palm mechitza, which is the flimsiest of mechitzas, if that's the minig, no party can claim, "No, I don't want that. I want something better." No, that's the minig. But the point, there's a minig called Sodaim that we don't accept. You know what minig is not valid? If it's a type of mechitza that does not resolve Hezekriya. In other words, if you're making a reed fence, maybe it was not woven together. Maybe there's holes. That's not acceptable because you have to resolve the Hezekriya. Now, this is not so sturdy, and every 10 years you have to replace it. Well, that's the minig. That's good enough. Now, Atkan, B'chlal, when we learn about a mechitza, you ask a yid in Torah, what's the height of a mechitza? Say 10 tefachim. 10 tefachim. The one exception is Hezekriya. The one, and that 4 amos. 4 amos is 6 feet. That's why in Chabad, by us, when we have a mechitza in the shul, unlike other great poskim that said a 5 foot suffices, we always go with the minimum of 6. That's a halachic thing. And we got that from Hezekriya. But since part of the mechitza is for the men's side not to be able to see into the lady side, so it's resolved with 4 amos. That's the din over here. Ein pachas ma'arba amos.
If they say that that's the reason for the mechitza.
If they say very good, okay, but we say so. Correct. I'm saying part of very good.
They said that wasn't the case.
Correct. Correct. Okay, right. But they were in the second story.
Right.
Okay, right. Anyways, ein pachas ma'arba amos. Geen bagina. Koifeyu, where it's different. The Rambam wants to emphasize the wall that one side can demand for the other to participate in by a garden has nothing to do with Hezekriya, because the usage of a gina is something that even if you can look into my gina, halachically, it doesn't stop me from doing with the gina what you're supposed to do with the gina. I'm not there to walk around undressed. I'm not there to bathe. You understand? I'm not there to walk comfortably in my clothing that I'm not comfortable. No, you're there to work in the gina. But there's something else by two partners, and that is that if there isn't a physical wall dividing my side from your side, if one neighbor is not that honest, he can wander off in the neighbor's property and even pluck off some of the fruits, and he's not afraid to be caught, because if he's going to be caught, I thought it was my property. I thought I was in mine. When you build a normal halachic mechitza, which is 10 tefachim, you have to step over it. You knew you're walking into your neighbor's property. Then there again, the mechitzas of 10 tefachim, and that's enough. What about an abika? Abika is a large open area where many people own different parts, different lands for which they planted, they made a field. Because of abikas chaveroi, only b'makom shenahagu. Sometimes certain peoples, they feel, I don't want you to see my field. I know that, or I don't want you to see how my field is depleted, because then you're going to know that I'm not capitalized and I'm not going to I'm going to take a loan. People are going to say, don't lend him money because this guy had a terrible harvest. Like, okay, but if the minig is not to build it and you want to build it, build gezum to hate, but you pay for it on your land. Here we're speaking about both parties have to participate and they have to share the land. Then kindness of But here there's something else you have to know. That the moment you build a wall on your land, you want to make sure that if the wall will collapse, it should be clear that the remnants of the wall only belongs to you, and you can look on the ground and see where the wall was built, and you want to make sure that people will remember that the makom of the kaisel was only yours. Because since many walls were forced halachically to be built by both neighbors, which means it was built on both properties. I don't want to be in a position where I'm going to build it for my money. I'm going to build it on my land. But at one day, 100 years later, the wall is going to collapse. I don't want the neighbor to claim, oh, that half of that land was theirs. So what do I need to do? So it's a gewaltige chaf. These are chazal, simple things. So you hear it, you say simple, but go to figure this out, you have to be a divine person. Guys, let's say this is my wall. I want to say if my land is here and your land is there, I'm going to build something. I'm going to make a square amma by amma of mortar affixed to my wall. I cannot put it on my side, because if I'm going to put it on my side, who's to stop you from putting another amma of mortar on your side? No one. I won't even see that you did it. And then when the wall will collapse and they're going to make a forensics and they're going to see there was sid from both sides, if a guy is dishonest, he can do it. If I, who build it, halachically will put it on your side, you cannot stop me. That's halacha says it. You'll never be able to put it on my side. That's the best way. It should be l'doiros, that this was a wall that I cannot force for you to do. So I did it, but I did it on my land with my money. So when it collapses, all of the stones will be mine and the land will be known to be my land. Beautiful. Now, even b'makom that no one can force on the other, you should just know many times it's good neighbors. If you're building it and I'm benefiting from it, you know what? I'll participate. Make sure to build the wall in the middle and make sure to put this chazes, this protrusion of mortar that's affixed to the wall, amma by amma, on both sides. Make sure it's there. It's going to be needed. It's better both, you understand, surely, than none. We don't want none. We want both because it was a makom. Some places no one built it. The seller never said that this gina is connected with other ginos. You never said that. But the fact was that the seller retained for himself a neighboring adjacent property also used as a gina. But guys, the word is from the moicher. Okay, I know it's then. Guys, they force him to pay for. Who knows the answer? Not to pay all by himself. They force him to pay for half. But you might have thought in such a case, why should he pay for half? The moicher never told me that he's next door. He never told me. I'm good. We're speaking about the makom shenahagu, right? To build this 10 tefachim wall. You have to do it. You didn't know, it doesn't matter. Wow. There's a bigger chiddush. You can argue, no one builds even the 10 tefachim wall. The moicher has the right to say, I only sold you a property. Why do you think I sold you next to me? I sold you next to me to make sure that I'm not going to open myself to the vulnerability that you're going to come into my field. Because when I buy a gina, I have to know that anyone, even the seller who should have told me, the neighbor that sold it to me will have the right to demand of me not to build it myself, but to divide it with him. We never say that. The final halach in this chapter.
Is this stam and stam? What's the difference in the first part of the halach and the second?
What do you mean? It doesn't say stam and stam. It says that the first part of the halach is even b'makom shenahagu, not to force building the 10 tefachim walls between two ginois, Danny. If the moicher is the one that kept some for himself and sold it, even if the lekech did not know that there's some chelik bagina that the moicher never sold, it's an umdana that if I had this myself and I'm selling you a part, I'm selling it. Both have to build. Both have to build. In a bika, if b'makom shenahagu, of course both parties have to build. As I'm telling you right now, it means have Danny. No, that's why I prepared. That's why I'm sitting here. You're sitting over there. It cannot be that koifa noisely. Koifa noisely means to build half.
Why do you not have to do it?
Because by a bika, the potential damage of a bika is much less. So if the minig is that everyone builds a wall, you have to follow the minig. If there's no such a minig, we don't have this umdana that the moicher meant that. Halacha yudches. Good. Makom shenahagu livnus haksalam avdil machatzeres uveginus avadam shenim gazis. Now let's go into other details. So the Rambam says when you build let's say by a chatzar, this hezek re'iyah, nekuda. The Rambam began by saying even if everyone built a fence made out of palms, okay, fine. What happens if fakir? The minig is to build sturdy walls, so it doesn't make a difference. Now there's avanim that were not hewed out; they are the widest avanim. Those avanim are 6 tefachim wide. That's mamish to begin the first Mishnah. So then everyone zen noisim shloisha tefachim. You have to give, each one has to give 3 tefachim is a lot of land. Each one has to give that. If the minig is to build it with hewed out stones, at least they are only 5 tefachim wide. Okay, zen noisim tefachim mechza, and this guy gets tefachim mechza. If the minig is to build it b'kfisim, some sort of broken bricks, which is 4 tefachim, each one gives the land of 2 tefach and 2 tefach. If the minig is to build a bilavadim, you can put it on the side. It turns out the total of 3, then each one gives 1.5. Is also to know, even in the place of you know what's very interesting? The interesting is that why do we even need to have this? Oh, you can ask, no, whatever the minig is. You see, it's not so new. If the minig is dafka something else, then you have to follow the dafka something else. It's mashma that if there's some people do this, some people do that. Like im sid, without sid, then the Torah says you got to build it with the mortar. Now, all of this is leading up to know, just remember that im nafal and even their broken stones have value. And more than that, it could be that when a wall collapses, all of the stones fall into one side, or it fell in the middle. And one ganef raped all of the stones into his property. And he claims, or he claims, and now he's the muhzak. Doesn't help. Chazaka does not, because the chazaka is that they both gave land and they both built, and they participated in the materials of the wall. Atkan. And now we're moving on to today's 3rd chapter. We're going to learn in Perek Shlishi about many types of the mandatory joint expenses that partners have when it comes, again, more dinim of shchenos. Perek Shlishi has 10 halachas, beginning with halacha aleph. Koisel, chatziv, hamavdil ben shnei shutfim shenafel. A wall, right, that divides, as we have been learning, that collapses. Now, forget about what we learned in the previous chapter, not forget about, put aside what we learned in the previous chapter, that the makim mishal shneim, that the materials, if they have value, or they always, everything has value, mishal shneim. Now let's go into rebuilding. Yesh l'chol echad mishneim lochav es chaveira livnoisei av goyva arba ames, only kedei shelo yiru zed zed. But no side can demand of the other to participate in the expenses higher than 4 ames. And I want to add something important. It's really helped up. Even if the wall used to be 10 ames. But sometimes we learned in the previous chapter, we used the expression grandfathered in. Here you would argue if me and you are neighbors. And even though Al Pidin, if we would have built the wall for the first time, no one can force the other to participate with more than 4 ames of stones. Whatever, we did it, our Zaydas did it. The wall was 10 ames, and it's there for 100 years, and we got used to it, and now it fell. Now we both have to rebuild it. If they both agree to rebuild it 100 ames, knock yourself out. If one party says, I don't want it 100 ames, the other part cannot force them. You can only be kaifa for all of that, which is a big thing, because the whole field for both parties is to resolve hezek re'iyah. Hezek re'iyah is resolved with 4 ames. Now, therefore, one party wants a wall that's taller for whatever reason. You know, now here comes a chap. Some people take advantage of that. So the halacha is going to say, if we realize, if we notice, we'll see soon how, that the one who did not want to pay is benefiting from that added height, if you're benefiting from it, if you're showing that you're benefiting from it, pay up. For example, the wall collapsed. Reuven and Shimon are neighbors. Reuven says, I want it to be 10 amas. Shimon says, okay, I'll pay for half of the 4 amas. And that's all that he was forced to do. So now this guy went ahead, right? Reuven went ahead and he paid out of pocket for the extra 6 amas. His fellow went and he built a wall right adjacent to it. That means he's using that wool for his house. The key is, in other words, I don't know the laws in California, but here, if there's a wall already, and I'm on my side, Reuven, I want to build a little shed. I need to have 4 walls. I got myself a wall. I'm using that wall for my house. Now, by the way, if I'm using a shed, if the other 3 walls that I'm building are only 4 amas tall, that means that I don't need the 10 amas. Nothing will, I won't be obligated to pay in addition. But if I now build 3 other walls, you understand, 10 amas tall, then not the whole, but half. If I built it 6, Gavaldik, I built it 6 means I'm not using 10, but I'm using 6. That means I'm a gala that I want for every wall to be 6 amas tall. So that's machayev me to pay half of the extra 2 amas. Beautiful. Another example, and for that they can even put up good pictures. People sometimes will make a hollow in the top of a wall, and they're going to put a beam that's going to go out perpendicular for whatever purpose. And that beam can only stand there because it's going inside. Now, if it's going inside any part of the wall that's higher than 4 amas, you're making use of it. For him, more than that, I went to the top of the wall, and I want to put beams that are going to go again. They're going to. This is on right angle. I don't want the beam to lay on the wall, so I put a beam on top of the wall, upon which I'm going to put my beams. I'm using the 10 amas wall. I got to pay for half of that 6 amma addition. Even though I didn't build, you can argue, hold on, but the wall was very wide. The wall is very wide. Why are you paying for all of the width? That's the way it is. The wall you have to build anyway for Hezekriya. You're arguing you didn't need the 6 extra amas. You do need it. You got to pay for all of the addition, not only in the height and in the width as well. Halacha beis. And now one guy actually did the building. Many people here are builders. And after they finish building it, they says, okay, now pay for half. And the neighbor says, what do you mean? I already gave you half. Normally, what would you say? No, you would say you're chayiv, right? No. That's the rule. The rule is that since it's so known that everyone has to pay for half, no one would begin building without getting half of the money. So now you have a case where the chazaka is it was already paid for. The toiveya, pay me half. The nitba is saying, I'm koifer hakel. So there's a din midrabanan. You're koifer hakel, you make a shua sesses. V'nishva hesses shenasa v'nifta. Achi yovi hateveya rai shalinos. However, aval and boat ilutvoyasi litn chelke betzor shag deva shoysev alarbam mipnei shesamachloi oikenegdoi. But if he built a wall of 10 amas tall, and as we learned in the beginning of this chapter, initially the neighbor was only chayiv to pay for half of the 4. Then he did something which now he's chayiv to pay for the rest of the height. And then when it comes to that added chiyuv, the one that built it says, pay me. The neighbor says, I already paid you, nosati, he won't be neman. Now it's the opposite. The toiveya will be neman, but there's another derabanan. That in many cases, like in this case, you'll have to take an oath, but whenever your oath will give you the right to collect, it won't be stam a shvuas hesses, it's going to be a shvua b'nekitas chayfetz, which will be a shvua derabanan ke'ein doraisa, as we'll learn later in Hilchos Shvuas. In Hilchos Tayim v'nit. Ein neman. El chaveiro nishba b'nekitas chayfetz, shaloi nasamoi, v'noitl mimenu kedin kol hanishboim v'noitlin. That's going to be mamish in the beginning of Hilchos Tayim v'nit. Achi yavi zerai shenasam. Halach again. Nishroi saloi churba ben chavis chaveiroi. Person owns a ruin in the middle of many other ruins. The definition here of the ruin is not only there's no roof, but the walls collapsed. Now listen to what's happening. And we want to make sure that one party who's claiming, I was good with the way things are, not wanting to participate in any of the expenses, that the neighbors who are out of pocket doing whatever they're doing, if it comes to a point where this guy who wants to absolve himself is benefiting, there'll be a point where he has to pay. So what happened is like this. Let's say Reuven and Shimon. Reuven owns the middle of there's a churba, there's like a house, Yisraeli, in the middle of many houses around it. Reuven owns the core, Shimon owns the surrounding, the soiv. And all the walls collapsed. And Shimon is beginning to rebuild. Now, when he rebuilds one ruach, he ends up also building a wall that's benefiting Reuven, because now Reuven's property is walled off, which gives it more privacy. So if Shimon only did it from 1, 2, or even 3 sides, and so here Reuven already has his house, mukefes gadol mishalosh ruchai seham. Don't forget, guys, if Reuven is benefiting from it, if he's an honest person, he would own up. He's claiming, I don't need it. Of course I'm benefiting. I don't need it. For me, I would leave it the way it is. He cannot be forced to pay any of Shimon's expenditures, because if you have a house, even though it's closed from 3 sides but open from 1, you have no benefit. And therefore, if the 4th wall now was put up, Achanim says that now his churba that was unwalled is now mukafes gadol von alle Seiten. Now megalden all of hakoil. Now we're mechayiv him to pay. Hakoil doesn't mean all of it. Of course, hakoil means half of all of these walls. The nois and chatziyah I saw shehoitzizeh ba'arba haruchais. And another detail, as we learned in this chapter, even if the Shimon built a 6 amas, 20 amas, he'll be chayiv to pay. He'll be chayiv to pay for the 4 amas, half of the 4 amas, ad arba amas. In other words, the moment I pay for half, it has to be, it goes together. I'm paying for it, it's going to be on my land. However, here, what not, that Rambam writes it out clearly, but if Shimon, who knew, Reuven doesn't want to pay, so Shimon is building his own churvas, and he's making sure that all of the walls are fully only on Shimon's property. Now, is Reuven benefiting? Yes, he is, but it was built on Shimon's property. The Rambam says he has to pay something. You can't be machetz gavaldik. You can't pay half of 4 amas. Not that much, but to say patr v'lo klum, you can't say either. What? This is called shuma the daina. This is a gavaldik concept. This is not something that the Rambam can legislate. The Rambam can only tell you a concept. Every case is a case by case. And who's to determine how much? The dayanim. Now, you can argue, let him pay more, because not only is he benefiting from having a fully walled inner house, but he didn't even have to give up his land. No, says the Rambam. Since Shimon built the walls on Shimon's property, the Reuven cannot use it. And you want, when you have a wall, to be able to make a hole in it, to use it for storage, to put a beam in it. You won't have such a right. So it has to be worth less. How much less? What happens? Shimon built from 3 sides. Reuven himself now went ahead and he made the 4th wall. What did he do by doing that? He was megala his das, that he wants to have a walled area. So now the noitz and chatzei size from the 3 walls, like we mentioned, half of the wall. And if not, shuma the daina. 2 houses, one on side of the other. Both people are using the roofs for a living. That's very important. Even if every house is on the other side of a public property. What's the word? Truly, if I have a roof that I'm living on and there's no walls at the edge of the roof, I'm not talking about the din. I'm not talking about the din of a makkah. Forget it, that's side. Then l'chayra, I don't have privacy there. Because if there's no fence, that means people that are walking with a Reshus Harabim can look. It's not true. First of all, people can only look during the day. And they can only look if I'm standing up near the edge. But my roof to your roof, even if it's going over a big street, me on my roof invades the privacy of your roof. Now, to solve that, so when we have a yard that's adjacent, so we build a fence, the minik, on the boundary, half on mine, half on yours. How do you do it over here? You're not going to build it in the air. So the vart is that everyone has to build for half of the width. But half of the width is not enough, because if you build it just half and half, then when you're standing the mamish in the middle, you can see in. So there has to be an extended area. The Rambam doesn't say how, because it has to do with the distance. I have to build, let's say, 55% of the right, and you build 55 of yours. But often that now we cannot see each other. That's the way each one is doing their fair share. One is machayev the other. And that's the key word, umadif. You have to extend it, and you have to see how much extension is needed for no one to be able to see into the property of the other. If half of my roof is unwalled or whatever, 45%, 40%, anyways, people can look into my roof. No, it's not true. The guys that are walking down the street can only see me. When I'm standing on my roof, when I'm standing towards the edge of the roof, but you can see me always. I want to add another thing that Danny said before, which is very important. I have another answer. Why didn't we say another answer? The fact that I'm on the roof and you're down there, like many people, they build a balcony in a shul for mechitza without building a mechitza. This is a raya l'chayr. It's not good enough because we don't say, no, people on the street have to look up. I'm not concerned with them looking up. You can see me looking straight. That's not an argument. Because since when you look up, you can see in, that takes away, that's hezekriya. Anyways, you're not using it. The answer for that is it's not true. At night, I would use it. Or I only lose the area near the edge. Okay. Halacha vav. If you have a roof, listen, near a chatzir. Gavaldik. Because it doesn't matter. People live on the roof, people live in the chatzir. Just to know another rule, that when people Stam did not use their gagen the way they used chatzeros. In the case, that's the norm. Has a kriya, so it's important. Whatever we learned before, right, in halacha, hey, that's why that Rambam wrote, was where people were using it ladira. It's very important. Normally, you don't do that. So now, what did we also learn? That between ginois, you got to build a wall of 10 tefachim. That will apply it. That's no difference. In other words, there's a wall that no party should be able to go and to claim he's not a ganaf. Protection. And then there's hezekriya. So even though there's no hezekriya, they're not on the same height. The guy that's living on the top. Now, let me say like this, guys. What's going on over here is we said that the wall has to be built surely on the property of both. You can't do it. The type of wall that's built cannot lean on just the half of the higher one. It means you have to begin that on the bottom. The guy in the top can claim, I'm not going to pay in the bottom. I'll only pay. He cannot say that because the wall that he's machayev to build needs that support. He's chayev to pay. Well, I will only pay for half of the wall that's being built, beginning with my level and up. No. They both have to share the expense from the bottom. Not only that, there's a certain area that since you are lower, the guy in the bottom cannot see to the top. You cannot see in there. The guy in the top can come to the edge and look down. Adarabba, whatever that is, only he has to pay for. Again, we're speaking about stam roofs that were not used for living in a way where, because of I have no privacy, I can't live in there. Because there, the guy in the top is not ruining the guy in the bottom. The guy in the bottom is ruining the chutzner, if that would be the case. In other words, if only one party is invading, upon him is to build. If I have a wall next to your garden and it falls down, there's another detail, and that is the owner of the wall is mechuyev to spend the money to get out those stones. Now, what happens if the owner of the stones doesn't want to be bothered? So what does he say? He tells the gino, you know what? I'm gifting to you the stones, and they are yours. In other words, they are yours, but you remove them. He doesn't have that right. However, if he agrees to it, verbal agreement is not a kinyan, but if he agreed, and then and no party can retract. In other words, who would want to retract is the Baal HaKois. If after they agreed and the Balagina clean, the Bal HaKoisel is not saying I retract. No. He's saying I'll pay you for your work. Ain't Shemem late. But on the other hand, if he made that offer and the guy said yes, but nothing happened yet, because we say he only made that statement in order for him not to be nudged, but he never really gave it to him. If there's one well that's being used, right, one spring that's going into 5 ginois, and now the water is damaged. So here's my kasha. Who's using whose? So the type of money that's needed, the water is going usually from Reuvens to Shimon's to Levi's, it's 5. That means everyone needs the water to go into Reuvens. Reuven also needs it. What happens from his property into the lower properties, only the lower properties need. The top property does not need. So therefore, the money that's needed for that refurbishment will be accordingly. So, it comes out that the Tachton will be Misakel with anyone and for himself. But the last piece for himself, he'll be the only guy out of pocket because none of the top 4 care whether it's broken or not. They don't benefit. It's not for them. And now in the reverse, the Rambam wants to give both sides. First will be the 5 chatzeros, and all of their water is pouring into a drain. And the drain got ruined. All of them have to participate with the tachtoina. Fakir. Here, because they all need the water to exit the tachtoina. The tachtoina doesn't care about the olyoina. Here it's in the reverse. So the tachtoina pays the least, and the olyoina pays it with everyone. Dim says olyoina masakenas em kulam, masakenas la'atzma, and the tachtoina masakenas mashni Allah, v'lo mishni Allah olamaylam. Okay. Shni Allah means he doesn't even have to participate with that which is above him. That's very important. They all need the water to exit. He doesn't care about the water entering. Let the water not enter, and I won't have to exit. Halacha yud. Final halacha is b'nei hanor mashkin al haseder. In other words, if you have one nahar, and that nahar is used to bring water into many properties, so we have to know the sequence into where the properties are situated to determine who gets to use it first. If one of them wants to dam up the river, because when you dam it, you cause an overflow, and then you direct the overflow into your property. That's the way they were getting water. So each one, in other words, even though one is closer to the other, there is a certain sequence. But we don't say that one has a right more than the other. So if each one is saying, I want to dam the river first, halacha doesn't have a determination. And this is one of the few places where you say, Kol hamizgaber zachan. May the stronger one win. However, when it comes to a cistern that's close to an irrigation dish, there we say that the people that jointly own a bar are more makbid one on the other, and therefore the sequence of who's closer, whose father, have to be followed. Mismal Erishain, and that's done because of Darkei Shalom.
Strength by brute force.
Depends if you're speaking with uncivilized people, strength by brute force. If you're speaking about Jewish people, it's strength by whoever's going to win the logical argument.